coming marriage. I think it looks interesting.
My name is Suhaila Amen, and I am currently employed as a judicial executive with the 19th District Court here in Dearborn. I have a consulting and event planning company and have worked extensively in the Arab and Muslim American community for over 15 years now. As an activist sitting on various boards and committees, and have the pleasure, though I think they left, but being a part of the Bridges team as well. I was born and raised in this country, and as Stan had mentioned, my sister will be marrying an Irish American in July. So that's been quite an interesting experience for our family. And it's something that has been actually is being focused upon for some types of interviews and possible work for one of the television stations, just following this, type of relationship and how the coming together of cultures and communities in Metro Detroit. So it's been quite interesting for us. I am second generation Arab American. My mother was born and raised in this country, and my father immigrated here in 1970. Both were activists in the community for over 30 years. I can actually trace my roots to this nation. My great-grandmother was born here in the late 1800s as well. So as my experience in my life in this community, I have seen every aspect of my community, from watching Dearborn begin to grow and develop in the early to mid-'80s, and coming to see it flourish economically, socially, and culturally in this community. We have been able to watch it truly advance in many capacities, and watch our youth now become a part of every aspect of social and cultural components of this nation. And we've had the pleasure of watching them succeed and go to, as high as, seeing them leave our community and work all around the world, and especially in the United States, a lot of them leaving our community and going to work on Capitol Hill in various, and within various government agencies. I'll pass over to Rana, who I know can give you much enlightenment, but from my end, you'll hear my responses from a grassroots community activist perspective, as opposed to our other two panelists who will give you different views.
Thank you. Rana, go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I want to first thank Stan and the organizers of the Sovereign Challenge Conference for putting this event together and for doing it in our hometown here in Dearborn. This is a very vital conference that has a lot of vital dialogue going on that's important to enhancing these relationships and that awareness and understanding in various communities. Just a brief background on myself. I currently run the corporate communications department for a major Department of Defense contractor based out of the Washington, D.C. area. I actually travel both between D.C. and the Detroit area, where we also have an office. I come from a community background. I actually, for the years prior to working on the government end, worked very closely with the community, with a major civil rights organization in the community. A lot of people would look at me and think, well, what kind of issues with someone like her face? She doesn't really look Arab or doesn't necessarily have an accent. Yes, born and raised here in the United States. But we all have our own stories to tell. My first experience with hate was actually at the age of 4, when my mother was picking me up from preschool and accidentally backed into a parked car where a man who was twice my mother's size came out and began physically attacking our car and shouting racial slurs and telling her to go back home. Of course, at the age of 4, home is right around the block where you live, but the fear that I felt at that age for myself and for my mother still resonates within me. during my first trip ever overseas outside of the US when I went to visit family in Beirut, Lebanon. I was pulled off of an American Airlines flight and taken to a garage that was over 100 degrees, separated from my family, where my luggage was completely stripped and searched by Italian police officers simply because of the fact that we were coming back from an Arab country and we had Arab-sounding names. That is exactly what we were told, mandated by American Airlines personnel. So for someone who was born and raised in this country and up until that age knew nothing but this country, that for me was my first taste of the idea that maybe I didn't belong. At 22, when I was hired as the public affairs director straight out of college for the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, I sat and watched in awe from my office as the towers came tumbling down on that fateful day in September. And not even 5 minutes later, as I was trying to understand what was going on, as I was coping with the fear and anxiety and hurt that all Americans were coping with at the time, I had to field calls from media asking me what I thought about the possibility that this was a terrorist attack by my own people. So immediately, I had to jump into defense mode, just like the rest of the community did. And during my time at ADC, which is an Arab American civil rights organization shortly after 9/11, the experiences just kept coming, one after the other. October of 2001, a New York Times reporter in my office who came to interview me about the experiences of the Arab American community asked me whether or not the American flag that had been hanging in my office for several years was put up there recently after 9/11 to prove that I'm an American, or whether or not it had always been there. And that was the first time that I felt that my patriotism was questioned. So yes, regardless of what I may look like, or what anyone may look like, everyone has their own experiences, everyone has their own stories to tell. And I think that more than anything, we all share a responsibility to listen, to share those stories, to talk about the experiences that we've had, how they've affected us, how they've shaped us, how they've molded us. I remember my first experience with my own ignorance when I had an Iraqi gentleman contact me talking about the FBI who had come to his house shortly after 9/11, wanting to find out information about his family. And as I tried to calm him down and explain to him that he needed to be patient because the FBI at the time was dealing with a number of inquiries, he proceeded to explain to me how his family felt. And this is an issue that U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuaid just touched on. He asked me first if I was born in the U.S. I told him yes. He asked if I had ever lived in a foreign country. I told him that I had not. So he proceeded to go on and explain that, well, let me tell you, in Iraq, when the federal government comes and knocks on your door, you may never see your home again. So you tell me how I'm supposed to explain to my parents that they need to be patient. And you see, even as an American of Arab background, I failed to understand that. But what I did understand at that point is that that lack of understanding is not something that you can blame on the individuals. That is something that it's a responsibility that we all bear, that we need to ensure we are creating an awareness within other communities of the issues that these communities are facing with. In 2006, my 8-month-old nephew, who was traveling with my sister and her husband back from the Dominican Republic, was pulled over by immigration authorities and detained for 2 hours because his name matched a name on the no-fly list. My 8-month-old nephew, whose mother and father were free to go. Needless to say, he goes by the name AJ now, not by his Arab name. But you see, why do people like me and Suhaila and Ahsan choose to be involved? It's because whether or not we've had to deal with these issues growing up, whether or not our children or our nieces or nephews have, it's something we hope to someday put an end to. Because I know that I don't want my children growing up in a country that I'm very proud to be a citizen of, where they have to fear leaving that country and possibly being questioned on their way back in, or feeling like they're hostages in their own country. So this is what we're all here to do, and this is why I thank you all for being here as well, and being open to that type of dialogue, because it's so very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Isan.
Okay. I finished law school in 1999 and began practicing law in Dearborn. I came to Dearborn around 2000. And the 9/11 hit in 2001. Before that, I was not involved in any Arab American cause or wasn't involved in any kind of community organization. With the 9/11, the ADC, Ahmad Hamad, the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, approached me because they needed a number of attorneys to help represent people that were being interviewed by the government or were being put in removal proceedings. And I got involved with them, and I saw the backlash that the community experienced. I was involved with Bridges, the organization that the U.S. Attorney mentioned, Ms. McWade, from the beginning. I went back to, after practicing law for a number of years, I went back to Wayne State and I finished my PhD. And I chose to do my dissertation on Arab American political involvement. And I used the study of the Arab Americans of the Detroit area. It was a study done by the University of Michigan. What I looked at is the political involvement of Arab Americans, comparing the first generation with the second generation and the third generation. A lot of people that come to Dearborn are taken aback by what they see, especially in East Dearborn, when they go and see the shops have Arab names, and they see women wearing traditional clothes. They think this is an exotic place, like this is outside the U.S. They're taken aback by that. But there is assimilation. Now, if you think of assimilation as somebody changing their name from Muhammad to Bob, or from, totally stopping eating the traditional food and changing their name, then we have a lot of people who have kept their ethnic names and still eat ethnic food, their traditional Middle Eastern food. But that doesn't mean that there is no assimilation. What kind of assimilation I'm talking about? There is political assimilation, which means that you are involved in the political process. And people in this area are involved in the political process. When you compare, I looked at three factors. I looked at voting, and I looked at campaign donations as forms of political engagement. And you see that if you compare the first generation with the second generation, you see a big jump in political engagement, which means that there is assimilation. If you're assimilated in the political process, if you're involved, then you're not alienated. It means you're not estranged from the government. And that's a good thing. But if you look at assimilation as somebody basically giving up their ethnic identity, changing their name, then that's a different matter. Now, I have 3 children and one stepchild. And when we named the children, our children, my wife chose the names. Actually, I chose one of the names. I chose Ali, and my wife chose Omar and Muhammad. And we joke, we tell people we chose the names from the terror watch list. To make sure that they get no jobs when they grow up. But these are the names, they're ethnic names. And you can't name him Bob Al-Khatib, It's a giveaway, he's Arab, he's Muslim. There's no way around, unless we change the last name. And this area is a special area of the country. I work in Kentucky. I get a job teaching at the University of Mid-State in Kentucky. And it's just amazing the difference and how people perceive this area or perceive Arab Americans or Muslim Americans. There are a lot of things that I take for granted, being Arab American, Muslim American, that they think is alien to them. And you think just like schools in this country take kids on buses to DC or to the capital to introduce them to the political process, they should bring them to Dearborn, as some kind of pilgrimage. Come see the Arab Americans and Muslim Americans. They're not scared. They can eat their food and all that. But I just remember that I'm not in Dearborn when I'm in Kentucky, in Murray, I went to see a house, and that doesn't reflect on the people of that town. They're very nice people. But one person was mowing the lawn of a house that had a for sale sign. And so I went and said, my wife, visited this area and she's interested in this house. Can I go inside and see it? And he said, yeah. And so I went inside and saw it and all that. And he asked me where I'm from and what do I do and all that. And then he asked me out of the blue if I have been vetted by the FBI. So I don't know how to answer to that. I thought, I'm not in Dearborn anymore. So. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me, the Suhaila and Rana. Suhaila, you're staying here. You're not going anywhere. Rana has gone outside Dearborn. Can you reflect a little on why you stay in Dearborn, perhaps, and Rana, why you left, and what's the attraction to keep coming back? I mean, what we see is, in many ways, an insular society, second, third, fourth generation Dearborn people, and then we see people like Isan and Rana who have left, but keep coming back also for whatever reason. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I stayed in Dearborn out of choice. I had been working for the Dearborn Public School System for 14 years and just recently began the position with the 19th District Court after just needing a change in my career. I've always been involved in the community, so I figured if I didn't get away from children now, I may not ever have any. So it was time to go. But I took that break and took that change. But the reason I stayed in Dearborn, I had always sought to get, originally I had planned to get my degree in international relations or international marketing with the hopes to travel overseas and get a job somewhere in the Middle East. Upon actually getting a job in the Middle East, I had to make the decision at the time whether, and at the time I was seeing someone, to make that decision, am I, to uproot and move halfway across the world. And when I realized that I wanted I was more family oriented as opposed to career oriented, I realized that traveling to Dubai, where the position was going to be, would not allow me the opportunity to have a family and be able to be at home for the majority of the time. So I changed my educational path and went into education and teaching and ended up staying in Dearborn. So that was just a personal choice on my end as to what I wanted, a career or a family. Had I known I wouldn't have gotten married, I may have taken that job at the time. But, it just made me put my own priorities in perspective. And my father had gotten ill, which, again, too, I had tried seeking employment outside of the state, but when my father became ill, I'm the eldest child, and I wasn't ready to leave my family and leave him. Though there is something about Dearborn, and as much as I say I'd love to leave it, I don't think I could last if I did. Though the opportunity to relocate has come up, and it's something I always do seek or try to, broaden my horizons. But there's a familiarity here that just continues to bring people back, that sense of family. And I know Rana will touch on this. Not only do Rana and I have we worked together professionally, but we're also best friends. So, just to touch back when it comes to our experiences, I know Rana hates flying with me. When we go on vacation, she's like, Suhaila, can you walk behind me so I don't get pulled over with you? Because I'm always randomly searched. So it's something that we tend to joke about when we're flying together. Or she, gets ahead in front of me. She's like, I'll just be waiting for you over there. I'll get us coffee. But these are, there are lots of experiences, and some of them hurt a great deal. Rana was able to touch on it, and Hassan as well. Stan put me on the spot, and I didn't know how I should introduce myself or say my experiences. But these are things that have helped to shape and mold us into the people that we are today, and again, as I said, give us that reason to continue doing the work that we do to educate others. And in enlighten them and allow them the opportunity to ask questions. I'm always very easy to conversate with. I love to strike up conversation with people on flights in the airport because I do notice that they look at me differently. And I always watch people walking, by me and will look at me when, I walk up to that gate and take my seat. And I tend to maybe speak English a little loudly. And my Arabic isn't that fabulous, so when I do try to speak Arabic, I just embarrass myself to my Arab friends who are sitting with me and look at me and say, just speak in English and do us all a favor. But it's that point where you realize, well, where does the point in time come where I do fit in? After post 9/11, I was on a flight to DC to meet with people with Homeland Security to discuss some issues, and I had a woman sitting behind me, muttering, "Oh, I'm really uncomfortable. I'm not comfortable with that veiled woman on the plane. I'm really not happy sitting here." So I turned around and I told her, "Then you need to get off the plane because I have a meeting to go and educate people like you." And this is, I'm going just for the day, and I'm, and I realized that this, the airline staff didn't know what to do either. You have a person who's trying to incite fear on a flight. And when the U.S. Marshal came on, I won't lie that I thought he was coming for me. I thought he was going to make me get off the plane. And when he walked right past me and addressed the woman and told her to keep her mouth shut for the next hour and 15 minutes, and then apologized to me, I felt at ease because, it's that initial fear like, oh my God, he's going to come and take me off even though I'm not the one causing the trouble, but because, I'm visibly Muslim, these are things that happen and, we do have to address them. But, back to that stand, I just chose to stay here more for personal reasons. I think if the opportunity had arose and I was able to leave the state, I probably would have, but my family kept me here, and Mom's hummus and tabbouleh, I couldn't leave. I don't know if I could do it. I've been all over the United States, and I've yet to experience the fabulous Mediterranean food that we have here anywhere else in the United States. So that's something that'll keep you coming back here.
Okay, Rana, why don't you talk about your experience and departure and the attraction that Dearborn may or may not still have for you?
Well, I've always kind of been the rebel in my family. I didn't necessarily go the traditional route of what most young Arab Americans do, which is technically go into fields like law, medicine, engineering. And that goes back to any immigrant community that is recent to the U.S. and what their idea of success is. And that is careers where they can thrive and they can do well and they can support their families. Just like any other immigrant community, the Arab American community, specifically the recent immigrant community, is very much tied to that type of success, that type of material success, because you've escaped conflict and political turmoil to hopefully seek a better life for you and your children. So when I started college, I wanted to go into public relations. My poor mother, who had me, and then my sister, who was going to medical school, had no clue what I was doing. It's like, oh, why are you doing this to me? I don't understand. What kind of field is this? Are we going to be supporting you for the rest of your life? And they didn't understand what I was doing. But that goes back to our individual responsibilities. Why did I choose the field that I chose to? Why did I choose a field that would further allow me to work closely with the media or any type of public issues or matters? It's because I felt that specifically as an immigrant community, we had a certain responsibility, to be out there and to be involved and to be talking to people about who we were. In my first visit to DC, which was when I was 20 years old, I did a program through Georgetown University and was there for a summer. I thought, my God, there's a whole huge world beyond Dearborn. And there's so much that we can do outside of Dearborn as individuals who carry, this specific background and these experiences in terms of educating people and even taking something back for ourselves to learn about what's out there. So it's always been for me creating that type of awareness. You know, whether it was with my work in nonprofit with ABC and civil rights, or my decision to go into a more government-related field. I heard, again, U.S. Attorney McQuaid talk about the first Bridges meeting in 2001 that had community leaders around it. I was at that table. I remember what that was like with John Bell sitting across from us. And I remember the fear in the eyes of those community leaders who had never before been able to get that close to a federal agent. And then I feel fortunate enough to have stuck around long enough at ABC to see the transgression from a community filled with fear to a community beginning to understand the way things work and how they can be effective. And it was amazing, because by the time I left ABC in 2008, I mean, you'd get around that table and you'd need a referee, because you'd have to hold people back from, you know, really vocalizing their opinions. And I'm sure to this day it's still like that. But even in my current position, it's about, for me, coming from the inside out. If we expect our governments to understand the communities that they work with, we have to be willing to contribute to that understanding, which was why my decision was made to move into a government-related position. Yes, I'm not gonna lie, I was called a traitor by many people in my community who had seen me as an advocate for the community, and now I had gone over to the quote-unquote other side. You know, the very entity that post 9/11 had traumatized the community was the entity that I was going to be working with. But what you see now, 3-4 years later, when people are starting to see results and starting to see how effective that work is a greater understanding of just how vital it is, just how vital forums like this are in order to creating that understanding. And so yes, I do travel back and forth between DC and the Detroit area. I was living in DC for about 1.5 years. I just recently moved back, actually last summer. And now my time is spent between both DC and Detroit. I chose to come back home because yes, family and community is very important to me. But I will not sacrifice the work that I do on a national level to enhance that understanding for that. So to me, both are very vital.
Well, thank you. We're out of time, but I wanted to conclude our little travel through Dearborn that we